New York City, the city of ambition, power, and unrelenting motion. It's a place where fortunes are made, where reputations are everything, and where a single misstep can mean the end. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, steps into the lobby of the New York Hilton Midtown. He's a man who understands control, a man who knows the weight of his signature on a contract, a man who, until now, had never truly feared for his life. The morning is crisp, the streets humming with the quiet rhythm of a city waking up. Businessmen check their watches, coffee vendors shout out orders, and tourists snap photos, oblivious to the storm about to strike. Across the street, someone is watching, a figure, motionless, blending into the early morning haze. No rushed movements, no erratic behavior, just waiting. Thompson adjusts his tie, nods to the hotel staff, and checks his phone. An investor's email, a routine message, nothing unusual. Then, a breath of cold air as he steps outside. 6:44 a.m. A faint pop, then another, and another. People freeze. For a split second, confusion hangs in the air. Then the screaming begins. Brian Thompson is on the ground, blood seeping into the pavement, his phone still clutched in his hand. The investor's email still open. The figure across the street is gone. 3 shell casings lay on the sidewalk, each engraved with something that stops detectives in their tracks. Delay, deny, depose. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a message. Who wanted Brian Thompson dead? And why did the killer make sure we knew exactly what it was about? New York City never stops. People are always moving, always looking ahead. But in that moment, time shattered. The first shot was quiet, too quiet. It was nothing like the chaotic gunfire you hear in action movies. There was no deafening blast, no fiery explosion, just a muted thud. A sound so small that, for a fraction of a second, no one reacted. Then came the second, and the third. Brian Thompson's body jerked forward as the bullets found their mark. His knees buckled. The coffee cup in his hand slipped, shattering against the pavement before he did. A final exhale. For one frozen moment, no one understood what had just happened. And then panic. People screamed. A woman dropped her shopping bag, apples rolling across the sidewalk. A man ducked behind a taxi, hands over his head. The doorman at the Hilton Midtown stood frozen, eyes locked on the body sprawled at the entrance. The assassin didn't run. There was no wild sprint, no desperate escape. He moved with purpose, slipping through the chaos as if he were just another pedestrian late for work. His mask concealed his face, his hands steady. A few blocks away, a security camera caught a glimpse of him. Black hoodie, dark jeans, a small backpack slung over one shoulder. He turned a corner, stepping onto an electric bicycle parked and ready. Within seconds, he was gone. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Too late. A pool of blood spread across the concrete. Beside it, Thompson's phone buzzed with an incoming call. His investors were waiting. But Brian Thompson wasn't answering anymore. Who was the masked gunman? Why was this attack so calculated, so clean? And why did the killer leave behind something so deliberate? Something meant to be found. Crime scenes tell stories. Some scream their secrets. Others whisper. This one left just 3 words. Delay, deny, depose. Detectives circled the shell casings like archaeologists uncovering an ancient curse. Each bullet had carried a message, etched with precision. Not random, not careless. Someone had planned this. Someone had wanted those words to be seen. Who writes on bullets? And why those words? The sidewalk was still slick with blood as forensic teams moved in. Gloves snapped. Cameras clicked. Footsteps shuffled around the body of Brian Thompson, now a lifeless shell of the man who had once controlled billion-dollar deals with a signature. Across the street, security cameras had caught something, a hooded figure moving with calm certainty. No hesitation. No wasted movement. Frame by frame, the footage revealed the escape. An electric bicycle parked in just the right spot. A smooth getaway, weaving through traffic, vanishing before the first sirens even reached the scene. No fingerprints on the casings. No discarded weapon. No eyewitnesses with a clear look at the suspect's face. This wasn't an act of rage. It wasn't someone snapping in the heat of the moment. It was a statement. But who was making it? The NYPD wasn't just dealing with a murder. This was an execution. A citywide manhunt began. Officers scanning street cameras, tracking any sign of the escape route. But with every new frame of footage, one thing became clear. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Was this personal, political, or something even bigger? The clock was ticking, and the killer was already steps ahead. Killers leave traces, no matter how careful, no matter how precise. Somewhere in the smallest detail, there's always a thread waiting to be pulled. Forensic analysts worked fast. The shell casings were smooth, too smooth, manufactured with precision, but not by any known brand. That meant only one thing: a 3D printed firearm. No serial number, no way to track the sale. A ghost weapon built for one purpose. Someone had spent time perfecting it, crafting something untraceable. But there was a flaw. The type of polymer used in the casing wasn't commercially available. It was specialized, the kind universities and research labs experimented with. That narrowed the search. Then came the digital trail. Cybercrime experts scoured encrypted forums, deep web marketplaces, anywhere someone might talk about custom-built firearms. One name kept appearing, a user posting under an alias traced back to a single device. The laptop belonged to Luigi Mangione, Ivy League graduate, engineering prodigy, no criminal record. On paper, he was just another ambitious mind, until they looked deeper. Hospital records told a different story. Diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease. Years of denied insurance claims. Treatments rejected. Appeals ignored. Then came the manifesto. Posted hours after the murder. Anonymous, but unmistakable. Healthcare isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. Profits over lives. Every denial is a death sentence. So I passed one of my own. It spread fast. Shared across forums. News outlets picked it up. Some called him a terrorist. Others called him something else. The NYPD didn't care about opinions. They had a name. They had a motive. Now, they just needed to find him. But Mangione wasn't running. He was waiting. Justice moves at its own pace. Sometimes slow, tangled in bureaucracy. Other times, it strikes fast. The search for Luigi Mangione was both. For days, his name dominated headlines. Was he a murderer? A vigilante? A symbol of something larger? The country debated while law enforcement worked in silence. They traced his last known movements. Bank transactions, internet activity, security footage, until everything stopped. No new digital footprints. No recent purchases. It was as if he had vanished. Then an anonymous tip. A man matching his description spotted at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The location made sense. A small town off the interstate, easy to disappear into. A place where nobody asked questions. The perfect stop for someone trying to stay invisible. Undercover agents moved in, watching from a distance. He sat alone, sipping black coffee. A tray with an untouched burger sat in front of him. His hoodie was pulled low, but there was no panic in his movements. Did he know they were coming? A plainclothes officer walked in first, pretending to order food. Two more circled outside. In a matter of seconds, the restaurant was surrounded. Then the signal. FBI agents rushed in. Chairs scraped. Customers gasped. Mangione didn't flinch. They ordered him to raise his hands. Slowly, he complied. No resistance. No attempt to run. But as they pinned his arms behind his back, securing the cuffs, he spoke. The system creates its own enemies. The words sent a chill through the room. Agents search his backpack. A ghost gun. Fake IDs with different names. A burner phone wiped clean. Whatever he was planning next, it wouldn't happen. But was he acting alone? Or was this just the beginning? Crimes have motives. Some are simple, greed, revenge, desperation. Others take time to understand. Luigi Mangione's reason for killing Brian Thompson wasn't a moment of rage. It was built over years. Investigators dug into his past. What they found wasn't a criminal mastermind or a career killer. It was something far more complex. Mangione had once been a name worth celebrating. Ivy League credentials. A mind built for engineering. Professors described him as relentless. A student who didn't just solve problems, but tore them apart to find what others missed. Then the illness. A rare autoimmune disease. Not terminal, but relentless. The kind that turns everyday life into an uphill battle. Doctors had treatments. There were medications that could help. But insurance companies had other plans. Claim after claim. Denial after denial. Appeals ignored. Bills stacking up. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as intended. Investigators found letters. Pleas for coverage. Rejection stamped with legal jargon that always ended the same way. Not medically necessary. He fought. He lost. Something changed. The brilliant engineer who once built solutions now saw a different equation. One where corporations profited while people like him were left behind. Then came the manifesto, a document filled with anger, but not chaos. It was methodical, precise, calculated. Healthcare isn't about healing. It's about profit. CEOs don't cure disease. They create suffering. They deny. They delay. They destroy. And they think they'll never pay the price. He saw himself as the one to send a message. The debate started immediately. Was he a terrorist, using violence to send a political statement? Or was he a man pushed beyond his limits, taking justice into his own hands? Some called him a murderer. Others called him something else. The law didn't care. A trial was coming, and the world was watching. Courtrooms have a rhythm. Words measured, arguments sharpened. Every detail weighed with precision. But this case was more than a legal battle. It was a statement. The world was watching. Luigi Mangione walked into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, eyes steady. He didn't look defeated. He didn't look remorseful. He looked like a man who had already accepted his fate, whatever it might be. The charges were clear. First-degree murder, possession of an unregistered firearm, conspiracy to commit an act of terrorism. When asked for his plea, he didn't hesitate. Not guilty. The room reacted in waves, gasps, murmurs, the sound of pens scratching on notepads. News anchors scrambled to decode his expression. Was it arrogance? Conviction? The prosecution wasted no time. They painted him as a cold-blooded assassin, a man who had carefully plotted the execution of a corporate leader. The evidence was undeniable. Surveillance footage, ballistics, the manifesto filled with words of rage. They demanded the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. To them, this wasn't just a crime. It was an attack designed to send a message, an act meant to instill fear in anyone holding power. The defense took a different path. They didn't deny that Mangione pulled the trigger. They didn't argue against the evidence. Instead, they turned the focus onto something larger. They spoke of a man who had been failed by doctors, by insurers, by a system that valued profits over lives. Medical records were displayed for the jury, pages filled with denied treatments, ignored appeals, medical jargon that boiled down to one simple truth. He was left to suffer. Was he a murderer? Yes. But was he also a victim? The courtroom wasn't just deciding his fate. It was deciding what justice truly meant. The nation held its breath. Would the jury see him as a criminal or a symptom of something deeper? A verdict was coming. And no matter the outcome, the world wouldn't forget his name. Halfway through the proceedings, an unexpected witness emerged. A former UnitedHealthcare executive. Not someone forced onto the stand, but a man who stepped forward willingly. His name, David Calloway. For years, he had worked behind the scenes, helping shape the very policies that dictated who received care and who didn't. He knew how the system worked because he helped design it. Now, he was ready to talk. Under oath, he spoke of quotas, targets executives had to meet. The more claims they denied, the higher the company's profits. It wasn't about medical necessity, he admitted. It was about cutting costs. We delayed, we denied, we pushed people until they gave up. A ripple ran through the courtroom. Then came the documents. Internal memos, leaked emails, spreadsheets tracking how many claims were rejected. Not random mistakes, a strategy. The prosecution objected, arguing that none of this changed the fact that Mangione had pulled the trigger. The defense countered that it proved motive. He hadn't killed for pleasure or profit. He had struck at the very people who made decisions that cost lives. Outside the courthouse, a movement was growing. Supporters gathered, holding signs. Some called him a murderer. Others called him a whistleblower. A man who had forced the world to see what it had ignored for too long. Social media exploded. Justice for Mangione. Healthcare corruption. Some demanded an overhaul of the industry. Others insisted he deserved no sympathy. Lines had been drawn, but the jury wasn't swayed by headlines or protests. They had one job: decide whether Luigi Mangione would live or die. And time was running out. The weight of justice is never evenly distributed. Some cases are clear-cut, evidence laid out, guilt undeniable. Others are more than crime and punishment. They are stories of power, suffering, and the choices people make when they feel there is no other way. Luigi Mangione's fate was no longer in his hands. 12 strangers, bound by duty, carried the burden now. For weeks, they had listened. Experts, executives, doctors, family members, cold facts, emotional pleas. They had seen the footage of the crime, the evidence of premeditation. They had also read the leaked documents, heard the confessions of a man who once worked inside UnitedHealthcare's walls. What mattered more, a life taken in cold blood, or a system exposed in ways no lawsuit or congressional hearing ever had? The prosecution had been firm. A life was lost. A man was murdered in broad daylight. No amount of corporate corruption could justify execution-style justice. The defense had pushed back. Mangione wasn't a killer in the traditional sense. He wasn't driven by greed, vengeance, or personal gain. He was a man left with nothing, making a decision that some saw as monstrous, others as inevitable. Then, a final shock. A letter found among Brian Thompson's personal belongings, unsent, addressed to the UnitedHealthcare board. In it, Thompson had admitted that the system was flawed, that policies needed to change, that lives were being lost to corporate greed. We cannot keep pretending. The public will turn against us. Reform is coming, with or without us. The words landed like a thunderclap. Had Mangione killed a man who was about to change the very system he despised? Or had he accelerated a reckoning that might never have come otherwise? The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the 4th, the courtroom fell silent as they returned. The judge asked for the verdict. A single sheet of paper, 12 signatures, 1 decision. The final gavel strike sealed his fate. The courtroom doors closed, but the story was far from over. Luigi Mangione's fate was decided, but his trial had cracked something open. The public response didn't fade, it grew. For some, he was a cold-blooded murderer, a man who had taken justice into his own hands and paid the price. They saw his conviction as a warning. Violence will never be the answer. For others, he was something else. Not a hero, not a villain, a man who had forced the country to confront what it had ignored for too long. News outlets ran special reports. Talk shows dissected every detail. Documentaries were in the works before the trial had even ended. But the biggest shock came from inside the healthcare industry itself. UnitedHealthcare was no longer just another insurance giant. It was a company that had denied the wrong person. The leaked documents triggered investigations, congressional hearings, lawsuits from families who had suffered in silence for years. Politicians, once quiet on the issue, now scrambled to distance themselves. Healthcare CEOs faced hard questions. Some resigned, others doubled down. Reforms were promised, policies reviewed, but real change, that was harder to see. And through it all, one question refused to go away. Did Mangione's crime make a difference, or was it just another tragedy in a system built to survive outrage? Months passed, then years. The headlines moved on. New scandals, new crimes, new debates. But for those who had watched the trial, for the families who had lost loved ones to denied claims, for the people still trapped in a system they couldn't escape, his name never faded. Some spoke it with anger, others with regret, but no one forgot it. True crime stories often end with a resolution, a conviction, a sentence, a final chapter that allows the world to move on. But some crimes don't end when the gavel falls. Luigi Mangione's actions sparked outrage, debate, and scrutiny that stretched far beyond a single courtroom. Yet, for all the noise, did anything truly change? The healthcare industry remained. Insurance companies still controlled life and death decisions. For every document leaked, there were thousands more hidden. But cracks had formed. Families who had once suffered in silence began to speak out. Lawsuits were filed. Investigations continued. The name Mangione became shorthand for an uncomfortable truth, one that could no longer be ignored. His story became more than a case file. It became a question. Was he a murderer, or was he proof of how far someone would go when they had nothing left to lose? No matter the answer, one thing was certain. History would not forget him, and the system he fought against would never be seen the same way again. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Or was this just another chapter in a system that never really changes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.